Hello everyone, this video goes through the story of Alan Wake. Alan Wake is a best-selling crime fiction author, suffering from a 2-year stretch of writer's block. He and his wife Alice travel to the small mountain town of Bright Falls for a short vacation on the advice of Alice and Alan's friend and agent, Barry Wheeler. Before their arrival, Alan has a nightmare about shadowy figures who try to kill him before an ethereal figure interrupts the dream and teaches him how to utilize the light to fend off the shadows. Upon arrival in Bright Falls, Alan goes to retrieve the keys and map to the rented cabin from Kyle Stuckey, the cabin's landlord, but encounters a mysterious old woman who tells him that Stuckey had fallen ill and she was entrusted to give Alan the keys. The woman directs Alan and Alice to a cabin on an island in the middle of the Quadrant Lake, a volcanic crater lake. As they unpack, Alice reveals to Alan the real purpose of their trip is to help break his writer's block by arranging for him to see a famous psychologist named Dr. Emil Hartman and leaving a typewriter in one of the cabin's rooms for him to work on his next book. Alan is infuriated and storms out of the cabin, but rushes back when he hears Alice crying for help. Alan returns to the cabin just as Alice is being dragged into the lake's waters by a mysterious force. He dives into the water after her, blacking out as he submerges. Alan regains consciousness a week later, apparently having driven his car off the road, but with no memory of how he got there. He attempts to reach a nearby gas station, but his progress is hampered by murderous shadowy figures resembling those in his dream. While fighting the shadows with light, Alan repeatedly encounters an ethereal figure in a diving suit similar to the one from his dream, which leaves behind pages of a manuscript entitled Departure, ostensibly written by himself, which he has no memory of writing. Alan soon discovers that the events of the manuscript are coming true, and the shadowy figures are townsfolk possessed by dark force. After killing the possessed Kyle Stuckey and reaching the gas station, Alan tries to alert Sheriff Sarah Breaker of his wife's disappearance, but Sarah states that there has been no island or cabin in Quadrant Lake for years, after it sank following a volcanic eruption years prior. Alan is taken to the police station, where he meets Dr. Hartman, the psychologist that his wife has mentioned. Hartman offers his treatment to Alan, but is pounced by Alan, who suspects his involvement in his wife's disappearance. Then his friend Barry arrives, taking Alan out. Alan receives a call from a man purporting to be Alice's kidnapper, demanding the pages of Departure in exchange for her, so he and Barry go to meet the kidnapper at the meeting place in a nearby coal mine. Along their way, a barmaid, Rose, calls them, claiming that she has found some manuscript of Alan's, so the two rushes to the bar to retrieve it. However, the barmaid seems having been controlled by some force, and Alan and Barry both pass out after drinking coffee there. After they awaken and resume the travel to the meeting place, Alan finds himself busted by FBI, who want to arrest him for the crime he has committed. A terrified Alan runs away, leaving Barry behind. Reaching the coal mine ahead of time, Alan worriedly awaiting the appearance of the kidnapper and Alice. However, the kidnapper didn't show up, but gives him a call instead, changing the meeting place to somewhere called Lover's Peak in a nearby national park. Climbing onto the Lover's Peak, Alan finally meets the kidnapper at the mercy of the mysterious old woman. The kidnapper confesses that he never actually had Alice, and then they are attacked by a dark tornado, which hurls Alan into Quadrant Lake. He awakens in a lodge overlooking Quadrant Lake under the care of Hartman, who claims that Alan is suffering a psychotic break, with the supernatural phenomena being fabrications of his imagination. Alan attempts to escape the lodge as the shadowy force starts to attack it, learning in the process that fake kidnapper was employed by Hartman to lure Alan to him. Hartman tries to stop Alan from escaping and gives the impression that he's aware of the supernatural events surrounding the lake. In the end, Alan meets his friend Barry, who helps him to escape the lodge before the shadow subsumes it and all those inside. Alan and Barry gradually begin to learn the truth about Quadrant Lake from the other townsfolk. An entity known as the Dark Presence, which taken the form of an old woman, Barbara Jagger, is trapped within the lake, attempting to escape by using the lake's power to turn fiction into reality. It had previously tried this with a poet named Thomas Zane, the figure in a diving suit, but Zane was able to resist its will and used his writings to cause a volcanic eruption that sank the island, stranding himself within the lake. However, over the years, the Dark Presence has grown strong enough to start to influence the townspeople and create forces that have pursued Alan. That night, as Alan and Barry take shelter, they get drunk on moonshine, and Alan starts to regain his lost memory of the prior week. Since Alice's disappearance, he's been forced to write departure because the Dark Presence is now trying to use his writings to escape, and is holding Alice within the lake in order to coerce him. The FBI agent finally finds they too, and Alan and Barry are both arrested. Though Sheriff Sarah doubts Alan's culprit, but she cannot convince the FBI agent until he touches Alan's manuscript and triggers the power of the Dark Presence. The agent is dragged away by it, and shadowy figures begin to assault the police station. Sarah, now convinced of Dark Presence's existence, helps Alan and Barry reach Cynthia Weaver, a hermit who knew Thomas Zane and prepared countermeasures for the Dark Presence's return. He leads them to the well-lit room, a safe room containing a light switch known as the Clicker. Through the power of Alan's writings, the Clicker possessed the narrative ability to destroy the Dark Presence. Then Alan bids farewell to Barry and Sarah, as only he can stop all these by putting his novel a good ending, thus preventing the return of Dark Presence. He returns to Quadrant Lake alone, fires upon the object summoned by Dark Presence, and dives in. Alan wakes up in the bed of his own home with Alice by his side, who comforts him that it's just a nightmare. But suspicious on Alice's attitude and the darkness around the whole room, Alan realizes soon that this is not real, and in fact, he's been trapped in a surreal alternate dimension known as the Dark Place, where thoughts and ideas become reality. After cleansing Alice from his own mind, Alan encounters Jagger. He destroys her with the Clicker. Afterwards, Alan completes departure by freeing Alice, who emerges from the Quadrant Lake and swims on shore. However, Alan now strands himself in a dark place, and he finds no way out. After fighting against numerous shadowy figures, Alan abandons his effort and returns to his typewriter again, beginning a sequel to Departure, Return.